On today's episode of High Tech Sunday, our hosts, Lengo Dean and Dr. Mark Vaughan, sit down with Jem Pagan for an insightful conversation on the new normal. Up first is Lengo Dean. Lengo is Career Communications Group's Senior Technology Editor. She has written for U.S. Black Engineer Magazine, Women of Color Magazine, and Hispanic Engineer Magazine for more than a decade. Next, Dr. Mark Vaughan. Dr. Vaughan is Manager of Technical Talent Pipelining for Corning Incorporated's Technology Community and is the lead for the Technology Community Office of STEM. In this role, Vaughan develops, implements, and manages PK-20 science and engineering programs and initiatives in support of meeting the technology community's near-term and long-term technical talent needs. In addition to his primary role, Vaughan is a sought-after training program designer and facilitator, and is a highly regarded diversity champion and community leader. Finally, our esteemed guest, Jem Pagan. Jem Pagan is an innovation expert. This role exposes him to some of the largest organizations in the world that are driving goods and services. Jem Pagan leverages his 25-plus years of experience as an IT executive to consult with enterprises on new market trends, disruptions, and innovation. He has served as the Director of Business Transformation Services for Oracle Corporation. He also served as the Chief Enterprise Architect and Chief Information Security Officer for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's Office for Information Technology. He is a member of the New York and Boston CTO Clubs, Open Networking Users Group, Chief Marketing Officers Association, Cybersecurity Alliance, Cloud Standards Council, Open Internet Exchange, and the Advisory Board of Continuum Data Center. And without further delay, High Tech Sunday, featuring Lengo Dean and Dr. Mark Vaughan.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Brandon. Welcome back, everyone, and over to you, Dr. Vaughan.
Great. Thank you so much, Lango. And again, I extend my welcome and greetings to everyone. We are really excited about today's conversation because it is hitting us where we live, the new normal. And Mr. Pagan, so happy to have the opportunity to actually engage you on this topic because it is one that you have spent a lot of time thinking about. Before we jump right in and have the conversation, it's always interesting on High Tech Sunday to find out how someone with your particular skill set actually got to this point in your experience. So can you tell us a little bit about how it is that you came into this particular field of study and expertise?
Good evening, Dr. Vaughan and Lengo, and thanks for having me. And thank you for the warm introduction. I would say that I'm a product of multiple mentors throughout my career, and I still leverage mentorship to continue to receive the guidance that I need. As you know, the markets are changing quite radically, and the blended IT professional is really the professional that has business acumen. They have, insight into automation and workflow processes. They understand organizational management. And I would say that my beginning really started at Morgan State University School of Engineering, where I studied and actually worked for Dr. Eugene Deloach for about 10 years before I entered into the private sector. And during the course of my experience at Morgan State University, I was given access to corporate partnerships, grant writing, advanced research, infrastructure, redesign and deployments. And I would say that probably is the single most impactful, part of my experience in getting into a more professional state today. I reflect on those early days because they fortified me with an understanding of what it takes to really drive the next level, and how do you bring the entire team on are the questions that I'm hit with every day. And I just am very grateful for my humble beginning.
Wow, thank you for that. And we certainly are excited to hear about your connection to Dr. Deloach. He is a giant in the field. But you mentioned how it is that the experience with industry, with corporate America, actually has been so pivotal. And certainly in a conversation about the new normal, that is going to be front and center. So let's just talk about it to get this part of our interaction going. How would you define this concept of new normal? We've all been going through changes socially, societally, even culturally. What do you think of when you hear folks talk about this new normal?
Well, it definitely is the new buzzword for sure. My initial thoughts really center on the fact that the new normal is really a more rapid pace of change that we're sort of thrust into because of the pandemic and what's occurring in terms of social distancing and the disruption to the workplace. I would define the new normal as the inability to leverage traditional means of commuting and working and embarking upon a new concept for what it means to be an enterprise workforce. And that really centers on the fact that remote and teleworking has increased substantially, as we all know, and understanding how to deliver products and goods and services to our customers is one that requires us to think outside of the box. So I think the new normal really comes down to a consistent state of innovation against the unknown that allows us to center on those principles that have gotten us this far and to leverage those same principles to go into this unknown. And as we begin to get closer to an inoculant, we get into the phase of distribution of the various vaccines, it's going to be really important for us to be patient with the process and understand that we probably are going to be in this state for the next 12 months minimum, probably 18 months if you're more skeptical.
Wow, that is sobering to think about. When we are in mind of how we look at life and work, you mentioned the whole area of enterprise. On a personal level, all of us are certainly familiar with physical and social distancing, shelter in place or lockdowns, and even teleworking, medical that is now kind of telecommuted. What is it, do you think, that we have lost or left behind as a result of this pandemic here, certainly in the United States, but even globally? And do you think there's any going back?
Great question. So what we've lost is the intimacy of working together as a team. And if you look at a lot of the strategies around building a positive culture, it really centered on bringing people together. If you think about diversity initiatives, it's all about bringing people with different backgrounds and different perspectives together. So that togetherness was usually in a physical space. Now we have to leverage technology to virtually be together, which of course has its challenges. But as we begin to embrace this more, I believe that it will become more accommodating to us as more advances are made in how we communicate remotely. It's going to be really important going forward, in my opinion, that we remain patient and positive. I think those are the two characteristics of the high performance employees and high performance professionals who understand, that change is inevitable and the rate of change is really the major challenge here. And if we're going to reclaim that which we've lost, we have to now reside and rely on technology more so now than ever. And I know that sounds like, sort of, you know, a cliche because we are so technology driven. However, when you think about the lack of personal presence, it's going to be really important that people begin to leverage patience and leverage their positive state, because otherwise, we will be thrown into a lot of unnecessary worry in trying to anticipate what's coming, as opposed to leveraging our principles to get us through this period.
So when you stop and think about the idea of our having lost some of or a lot of our physical connectivity, the opportunity for us to sit shoulder to shoulder in a conference room and wrestle with a tough problem, that certainly weighs on us in more ways than just the physical and even our ability to innovate. One of the things that is really attractive to me about High Tech Sunday is the fact that we have the technology, but we also have the spiritual side as well. So, what are your thoughts about how we can, from the spiritual side of things, really deal with what we've lost? What can we lean on that particular ground?
That's a really important question, and it's one that will have varying opinions. So all I can offer is mine, and my opinion is just that, a humble one. I would again pivot back to really focusing on what is the positive path, what is the positive response, what are the positive thoughts that we can draw on in moments when we have indecisiveness in front of us. I think from a spiritual standpoint, we're always taught to take no thought, not to worry. Sufficient in this day are all of the activities we need, and we should put off thinking about tomorrow, and we certainly should not delve into the past. That's easier said than done, because our brains are constantly collecting both thoughts from the past and the future, and once in a while we pause enough to stay present. I think the spiritual aspects of what's been taught across multiple religions really goes into the fortification of our commitment to not try to define the future too far into the future, because unfortunately we have no control of that, and any thought into the future is just an illusion. It's speculation, and when we put too much ownership on our thoughts in terms of the past and the future, that's where we begin to trap our feelings and sometimes get caught into a cycle where we can't break it. So I think spiritually we have to stay focused on where we are right now. What are we doing in this moment that helps us to remain positive? What are we thinking? And what should we begin to focus on that brings the positive thoughts to the forefront? And the reason why I'm harping on positiveness is because it's the opposite of negativity. And we see lots of examples of what's happening when people lose their patience, when they feel trapped or feel somehow cornered, and the lash out and the anxiety and the anger that is caused is really focused on a lot of unnecessary thoughts around what they can't do, as opposed to focusing on what we can do in the moment.
Positive and patient. That ought to be a new hashtag. I may have to adopt that one. I said a few minutes ago that you really gave us a sobering perspective on how long we may find ourselves not so much in a holding pattern, but in this particular pause that we're in. You said that you're thinking, and it certainly is corroborated by a number of reports, that we could be in this for 12 to 18 more months. I remember when we here in New York State went on lockdown back in the middle of March. One of my children, who is a manager for a technology company, said 2 weeks in, I can't do it. I can't take another week. This has got to end. And then here we are, 4 months in, and now we're hearing another 8 months or another 18 months. So I guess the question is, after 18 months, will we come out and the new normal will be the old normal? And if that were possible, what would your hope be that we don't come out of this period and lose?
That's a great question and a loaded one, Doc. I'll do my best to address it. So it really comes down to understanding that in the new normal, we may never get back to full capacity anytime soon in terms of a return to the workplace. And I'm saying that because of the spacing requirements and the social distancing that is required. I'm sure you are aware of the new COVID-19 response from uh, hundreds of healthcare professionals that are now saying the mask has become the most important deterrent to catching this nasty virus
Right.
because of the airborne capacity when we speak openly. So when you think about this, you really think about how do we effectively build out the right social distancing within the workplace. And what I'm beginning to see as a trend is the half on, half off, where we have a distributed workforce that comes back to accommodate the social distancing. Of course, they can't go back to 100% capacity. This is even impacting the school systems where my daughters are being told, and as parents also, we're being informed that we may have to have distributed school days where part of the week is homeschool or remote learning, and the other part will be in class with social distancing. I think this is going to be the safest route going forward, because if we don't get a handle on the spread of COVID-19, we're going to find ourselves in this pattern for much longer than is required. So I think it really comes down to understanding that the guidance we're receiving as far as masking ourselves and constantly, cleaning our hands and making sure we're conscious of touching our faces, all seem somewhat, trivial after you've heard it for the last 4 months. But I think the message has to be driven even more going into the fall season, when we think there may be a second wave if we're not careful about what we do this summer.
So let me ask one more question, and then I'm going to hand it off to Lango, because there are some workforce conversations that are being had, and we're interested in getting your perspective on them. We've gone through a lot that has shaken us, has changed how we are showing up, and it is evident that for the foreseeable future, if not forever, we're going to be changed. And so, how would you say, and this might be a technology and spiritual question, how can we approach this with enthusiasm? Is there a way to actually embrace this new normal as opposed to kind of just enduring or thinking we have to suffer it?
I think the embracement is to accept it. I think the resistance against where we are causes the anxiety, and is one of the sources of it. By accepting where we are as a nation, as a corporation, as an individual, it helps us to settle and to center ourselves, to accept the things that we cannot change, and begin to understand within the context of maintaining a positive and a patient demeanor, we have to build support groups. And I think a lot of HR professionals are working diligently to begin to address the new culture in the new norm, which is a distributed workforce that's connected via the projects and via the workflows that have now been extended digitally to to the remote community, builds the need to make sure that we have, to your point, a safety net. In other words, I believe HR will probably set up a hotline that says, okay, if you get to a point where you feel like you're going stir crazy because you're looking at the same screen and you're sitting down for hours, we're now going to issue a red alert that allows you to tap into HR or management to talk through it. I think we also are going to find that the way that we strategically take breaks is going to change as well. And I think the breaks we need to take are both mental and also physical. I know that, being here in New York City, an epicenter of it all, I've had to completely modify my workout schedule. So I've taken up walking for the first time in my life, and I am actually healthier during this period because I did not want to get, any bigger, and I did not want to engage in unhealthy eating. So now I'm cooking. Now I have the time to do that, and I can plan meals, and I can take the time to make it a healthy meal. So the time that we are giving back, really, in my opinion, becomes valuable because that's our ability to now say, in the context of things, if I'm accepting where I am, let me begin to correlate within myself the things that I know I need. So if I'm going to take a break, why not do a few push-ups, or why not run up and down the stairs a few times and bring my mind and my body back together so that I'm focused and I'm re-energized and my metabolism is increasing. I think you'll start to see more guidance from corporations on how to not just cope with being in a remote sort of a workplace, but how to take advantage of it, how to get the most out of it. And I think we also have impact on the family situation because you now have working moms and dads who have to look over their shoulder to make sure their children are okay. And I think you're going to start to see corporations make accommodations for that as well. And there's been a lot of understanding so far over the last 4 months or 4+ months in all of the conference calls and meetings I've had, to see, the little kid run across the screen and hop on. It's actually, a nice, determined from, just constantly looking at, the same people. So I think the tolerance for the family situation when we're working remotely like this is also a positive because we now have more patience for the multitasking that we have to do as we care for our family and ourselves while we still apply ourselves to work.
Thank you so much. I know that Lango has questions about workforce and economy, so I'm happy to welcome her back to the conversation. Take it away, Lango.
Thank you for listening to High Tech Sunday, featuring Lango Dean, Dr. Mark Vaughan, and our special guest, Jem Pagan. This week's episode is brought to you by the 2020 Women of Color STEM Conference, taking place in Detroit, Michigan, and online from October 8th through the 10th. And now, a word from our sponsor.
From waves of change come oceans of opportunities. This has always been our Women of Color STEM Conference message and mission. Now more than ever, we are expanding our rich history and track record of hosting live-streamed award shows and interviews, virtual job fairs, learning, and networking experiences to complement our on-site events. We're primed and ready to respond to the challenges from COVID-19 as we reset to rise at our 2020 Women of Color Hybrid STEM Conference on October 8th through the 10th. The world is counting on us. Come ride the waves of change as you explore our limitless oceans of opportunities that can enrich, inspire, connect, and support your continued professional and personal growth that have always been the hallmarks of our women-driven conference. Together, we can help our nation's industries, government, academia, and the military reset, reinvent, and re-energize. Whether you experience our 2020 Women of Color Hybrid STEM Conference in person or in the comfort of your homes or offices, our physical and digital worlds are coming together in a new direction with an innovative conference platform. Take advantage of distance learning with more expansive seminars and continuing education credits. Attend our job fair in person or virtually. Experience the unmatched expertise of women leaders through invaluable training sessions. Be entertained at our awards events and much more. As always, you belong here within our trusted community. ride the waves of change as we reset to rise. The world is counting on us.
Again, the 2020 Women of Color STEM Conference takes place in Detroit, Michigan, and online from October 8th through the 10th. Now, back to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Vaughan. Welcome again, Mr. Pagan. I was sort of really caught up in your discussion with Dr. Vaughan about how work had become very distributed. And I was thinking, is this the word for the entire workforce, or is this the word for people who work as teachers, who work as professors, who work in IT? How would you describe this new workforce?
So, and thank you for the question, Lingo. I think we have to draw a line down the middle of the paper. And on one side, you would have client-facing professionals who have to interact with their clients in person, because there are certain positions that are bound to client-facing tasks. And then you have what I call the back office. Those are the employees that support, what products and services are being delivered to their particular target customers. And if we were to look at the employees that are really back of office employees who are operational, they're not necessarily client facing, I think you have less of an impact when it comes to how they perform their duties. And if you think about professionals who are in the IT sector, we do remote access all the time. I would say that if I had to go on site with every client I serve, I probably would go stir crazy. So there's a certain faction of our workforce that's already tuned up to remote dial-in, remote teleworking, and so forth. And then there's a faction that's used to going into an office. They're used to their office, their cubicle, or their work area, and now that's been transformed to their home. And I believe those employees have a shorter sort of a path towards getting into a new normal state by basically having access to the same resources and technologies that they need every day to do their job. The challenge comes to the client facing. That's where the real challenge is. And there's a couple challenges, and not to go into a doomsday rant, but let's be realistic. Client-facing employees have been impacted the most. When you think about the service industry, you think about restaurants, you think about hotels, airlines, these particular industries, malls, bodegas, small shops, small businesses, franchises. These are the most impacted right now. In terms of needing to maintain revenue and needing to have access to customers. I believe that they're really anxiously waiting for like the phase 3 and phase 4 of lots of states. Now, here's the challenge. Every state and every city has jurisdiction on the reopening and the phases that they've identified for their reopening plans. So now we're into a really distributed sort of client-facing workforce where one city or one state may be completely open and say, hey, you know what, dine-in is now allowed. And you may have other states like in New York where, outside dining is allowed. And we have a certain limit in terms of how many customers can enter into a tenant location, and that has to be monitored. So that is going to reduce the workforce. It's just what happens when we have disruptive economic experiences or events like this. I would encourage those particular individuals to really start to look at this time as a time to build out, their own professional development and career plans. In other words, retooling, certifications, hobbies that can be turned into financial, or revenue opportunities. We have to think outside of the box. And I know that could be termed or deemed as or received as a cliche, but really it's not. It's a principle that has been carried down through multiple generations since the beginning in the early inception of the United States. We've always thought outside of the box. And if you think about the different ages that we've gone through in this country and in this short sort of lifespan existence, it's really a constant, innovative look into the future as opposed to the dark and mire. Now, does that really help someone who has to pay rent or has to meet, their utility bills? No, that does not address any short-term needs financially. But what it does do is encourage them to look into the opportunity and take advantage of any assistance that's available. But while that assistance is being provided, they also need to look at where they want to pivot in their career and take full advantage of this time to start to really invest in themselves and start to really educate themselves. And this again helps us mentally and is definitely a wellness sort of positive play, because now you're activating your mind as opposed to allowing the worry to get the best of you.
Thank you, Mr. Pagan. So here we have, and I'm happy you mentioned that, you have people in the face-to-face industries, people we all know, and you also have people who, with bachelor's degrees or higher, or people more likely to work from home. So we have sort of like these two groups or three groups in the workforce. And how do you prepare for challenges in either of these groups? How do you prepare for the challenges ahead? I know you started mentioning some of them, but how do you prepare for the challenges ahead? So there are going to be a lot of challenges ahead.
Yeah, the first step is just to accept exactly where we are as individuals, not necessarily identifying with any group, but as an individual, I need to accept what's happening and where I am and allow that to just sink in and say, yes, this is the case. My livelihood has been disrupted. The next phase is to look to see where their particular skill sets can be leveraged for new opportunities. In other words, what do I bring to the table? And it's not necessarily a skill in terms of technology or management. It really talks about the personality and the character of the person. Am I a team-oriented person? If not, I probably want to start to look into what it means to be team-oriented. Am I a self-starter? If not, I probably need to take this time to really understand what it means to be a self-starter. In other words, what does it mean to me to not wait for direction, but look for the opportunity to support and help? Many people will say, well, these are soft characteristics. I will tell you, and I've hired hundreds of people throughout my career, we look for the personality fit and the cultural fit within the organization. And usually that carries a higher, I would say, standard with the hiring, a manager or the hiring body, because you can have a really gifted employee, but if they're really not tuned up with adopting the culture and understanding, communication, both written and verbal, then you have this great resource that really requires additional training. So if I am looking for my next opportunity, the last thing I want to do is to rely on my potential employer to give me certain skill sets that I can acquire on my own. How do I get there? Well, the first thing we have to do is to start to read. It's fundamental. And in this fast-paced society, we just don't read enough. And if you don't have the patience to read, you really should look at Audible or some, even the open source solutions are available. So if you don't have the money and you can get to your local library, there's a number of open source solutions, just like Audible, that allows you to have the book read to you. Why is this important? It's super important because if we're not educating ourselves in the moment, then what are we doing for ourselves? And when you think about, disruption, the one thing that I was taught by my mentors at an early age was to self-disrupt. to constantly look at what I'm doing and evaluate it, not to judge it, not to monitor it, but to observe it. Observe it for the opportunity to improve. And when we start to get into that mindset, that's actually a skill that's invaluable in any enterprise. The person that's thinking outside of the box, the person that's looking to innovate, they're going to have a different conversation with their peers and with their management teams. They're going to have a different perspective on how a problem can be solved. Why? Because they're now getting themselves into a mindset where they're basically saying, since this is the new norm, I have an opportunity to redefine myself. What do I want to be, and how can I get there? The next sort of approach is to begin to look at the market. You know, what sectors or what industries are impacted the most by this pandemic, and which ones are still, in place and still, chugging along, and what services and products do they provide that allows them to stay operational. And then look even further and start to look at the business shows, and start to follow market news, because that's where a lot of insight is sitting and waiting to be consumed. And it really says, I'm going to start to look into areas where I believe the market is going to grow, where I believe I will be in a position to offer value, and then I can start to work my way towards that goal, as opposed to giving up or waiting for the next sort of payment to come, because we know that those payments they have a term limit. We are not in a position as a country to support a national payroll for much longer. So now that we have this opportunity, let's treat it as such: an opportunity to improve, an opportunity to educate ourselves, an opportunity to retool ourselves, an opportunity to discover that which we feel could be beneficial to our career overall.
Thank you. I like how when you talked about it's trust in yourself as a person, having that confidence and trust in yourself. And of course, that confidence and trust has to be externalized. You have to put it out there, and trust in the forces, the workforce, what you're doing, your team, who you're working with, and all that sort of thing. But the reality is, Mr. Pagan, I was reading something, 82% of computer programmers, engineers, economists, astronomers, physicists, and other people working in STEM work from home or able to work from home. You have, of course, the chief executives, lawyers, accountants, managers able to work from home. 98% of teachers, professors, librarians, and other people able to work from home. So what would you say to people who are not in these categories? How do they establish trust in the workforce, this new normal workforce? How do they establish trust in it?
Well, they have to look at whatever their career is today, and if that career path has been disrupted by the pandemic, it's important to accept that, to say, okay, there is an issue here. I'm not saying that everyone can pivot towards technology, nor does everyone like technology enough to invest the time and energy it takes to build a skill set. However, there are lots of positions that are needed by technologists every day. When you think about project management, you think about content managers, you think about testers. There are so many different facets available that does not require you to have a technical degree or technical experience. That's very, very important. Another aspect is to take advantage of the availability that the person has to make themselves available as a, a, a consumer of technology with attitude to make money from it. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at Google and Amazon and Microsoft, they're now paying people outside of the tech industry to bang against their applications, to discover the new features and functionality and give them feedback. It is not far-fetched to think about, an individual maybe leveraging, relationships that they may have had with other peers, and forming a group that says, hey, we understand people, we're client facing, this skill set's very important because we understand the sentiment, we understand how to manage through difficult situations, we know how to deliver the customer experience. Now let's go and find the corporations and the startups and the businesses that need those eyes and ears on the products and services they're developing, and become an end user tester, or become, a customer experience a specialist. Why? Because that's the skill set they currently have. They may have never thought that the need to have testing for these applications we develop is so critical. Why is it critical? Because a lot of the team members are already vested in the technology. Having new eyes and ears on these applications and these technologies and products we're developing really gives us more of a diverse feedback engine that we need to improve on and to continue to innovate on these technologies. So it's not far-fetched to think that an individual or a group of individuals can come together and begin to market their services to companies that need that type of talent and need people who have customer experience to help them to understand how to transfer that face-to-face customer experience to a digital customer experience.
Wonderful, Mr. Vaughan. Thanks for laying that groundwork on basically the job outlook and the economy. But to go a little bit deeper into the COVID-19 economy and post-COVID-19 economy, I'm going to throw you back to Dr. Vaughan, and I'm also hoping to hear your comments on training and certifications, so what they're going to look like. Over to you, Dr. Vaughan.
Thanks so much, and you hit the nail on the head. So before we start to close out and hand it back over to Brandon, could you give us some thoughts on how certifications and trainings are going to be impacted as we go forward?
The wonderful thing about certifications and online training is that there is a huge amount of choices out there. I'll mention a few. Udemy is one that I really enjoy. I use it myself because I'm constantly learning new technologies. I'm constantly learning new business strategies, and I'm constantly looking to expand my skill sets every day. It's something that I was introduced to when I was at Morgan State University, and I'll never forget. Hewlett Packard Corporation issued a thought leadership white paper, and the message was continuous learning. Help us to send the message to your students that when they enter into the workforce, we need them to have one solid principle, if nothing else, and that's to have a mindset to constantly learn. And I think that continuous learning is something that sets apart average employees from high-performing employees or professionals. I think also universities have been very accommodating, along with community colleges, who I think have been the most accommodating in helping to transition and employees that have been disrupted by this pandemic into new areas of opportunity. So leveraging resources online, and then you have the free, the YouTube, and the amount of training and amount of learning available on YouTube alone is just it's awesome. And I think once people accept where they are, they can start to focus on that positive and patient path towards a better day. But we really do have to focus on accepting it, and then starting to really understand ourselves. And it begins with just sitting down and just jotting down the things that I like and the things that I don't particularly like, and the things that I would like to learn, and the things that I feel I've learned pretty well. And make that mosaic, and I call it a mosaic because that's what we used to say in financial services for so many years. That mosaic of yourself, when you put it on paper and you look at it, you begin to see a canvas that can be shaped into and structured into a pathway towards a more successful and promising future. But it does take a little upfront effort on our parts to, number one, focus on constantly learning. Continuous learning is here to stay, and that is the new norm, because no matter how comfortable I may be today, there is no guarantee that disruption will continue into the future. So I'm always looking to expand my skill sets. I don't want to rest on what I know. I want to rest on the ability to constantly learn. If we can build and get that message out there, along with also going into ourselves to figure out what it is that makes us happy, what gets us out of the bed in the morning, what makes us positive about life, and then taking this opportunity to start to explore that. Now, most people will look at the barriers and they'll say, "Well, Jim, that sounds great, but you know what? The time it is going to take is going to be, anticlimactic against what I'm facing up front." However, I will tell you that what you're facing up front, you're still going to face. Whether you embrace it or you resist it, it's still there. And no matter what you think, and no matter what I think, it's still here. So we have a choice to make. Do we embrace it and go into this with an attitude to find the best path possible for ourselves? Or do we resist and hold back and complain and basically go into self-pity, which ultimately could lead to a depressive state? So I want to encourage people to go into it, embrace it, and say, yes, I am here. I have a choice. The glass is half full, or if it's half empty, or it's half empty. I want it to be half full for myself, because I can't afford to just, bask in what it is that I can't change, but focus on what it is that I can. And it could be something minute. And you start there. And then in the next moment, you do the next thing. And before you realize it, the person's now starting like a machine to get revved up. And the moment that they get a little success, that it reinforces and encourages them to keep going. And then when they get down, there should be a support system. It could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be a group, it could be peers, it could be friends. But understanding how to reach out ahead of time before you need support, and focus on the people that we trust to say, hey, I may give you a call because, sometimes this gets the best of me. And basically what I want you to do is just to help me to steer right back into the positive. And I think those are the basic bare minimum approaches we can take to get the most positive experience out of this pandemic.
Wow. Help me steer into the positive. I think that's a great note for us to end with. I think, Mr. Pagan, that I can speak for Lango Dean and everyone associated with this broadcast, that this has been a provocative, timely, and encouraging conversation. We appreciate your time and look forward to continuing to stay in touch as you are leading the efforts around new normal embracing. With that, I am going to turn it back over to Mr. Brandon Newby. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of High Tech Sunday. Career Communication Group's High Tech Sunday looks at professional development and technology through the lens of spiritual philosophies. In a time when digital information is more critical than ever, this weekly program is produced by and for CCG's community of alumni and professionals in science, technology, engineering, and math fields. The community runs from national thought leaders to aspiring students, and this weekly series aims to bring a concentrated discussion around technological advancements and achievements based on universal moral principles. The 1-hour podcast will be streamed every Sunday. The podcast can be accessed through the BEA Facebook page, Women of Color Facebook page, and CCG YouTube page, in addition to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podbean, and Spotify. Please join us next time.